Bashkortostan, Ufa district, July 2010. The duty crew of the Republican Rescue Service received an emergency call about a fire. Several kilometers from the capital of Bashkiria, a forest area was burning. The team quickly moved to the specified location. The rescuers suspected that the cause of the incident was the drought that had caused hundreds of fires throughout Russia that summer. At the scene, however, it turned out that nature had nothing to do with it here. During the firefighting operations, a Lexus vehicle was discovered. It became clear that exactly this once luxurious car was the source of the fire. Someone had brought it here, set it on fire, and driven away. The question arose, why would someone want to get rid of an expensive vehicle in such an unusual way? Had the driver possibly caused a serious incident on the road and decided to destroy the evidence? The rescuers passed the information about the strange find to law enforcement agencies. Even before their arrival at the scene, however, the investigators determined that recently in the Ufa district, not a single serious traffic incident involving a Lexus had been registered. Presumably the incident had occurred without witnesses, or the car had been reported as stolen, or perhaps the car had been driven by young relatives of the owner. They had taken it without permission, and when something unpleasant happened, they decided to fake a theft. Only the owner of the car could provide answers to these questions. Identifying the owner proved not difficult. Although the arsonist had prudently removed the license plates, he did not consider that the necessary information could be obtained by examining the engine. The owner of the Lexus was Emil Shaiganov, a 30-year-old engineer of the Ufa company Energo Innovation. The vehicle had not been reported as stolen, but when the investigators established the identity of the owner, it turned out that Emil himself had already been considered missing for a week. The report to law enforcement agencies had been filed by his mother. She reported that Emil had gone with friends to a body of water and had not returned. This happened on Friday after work. When Emil did not come home that evening, the mother was not worried. After all, her son was independent, and it was summertime. However, when he did not appear at work on Monday and did not contact anyone even once, she concluded that something serious must have happened. At the local police station, her concern was considered justified. And after the discovery of Emil's burned-out car, the city investigation department began investigations into his disappearance. Suspicions arose regarding a possible incident. Who could have ambushed the engineer? Criminals who had targeted the expensive car? Such cases are not uncommon. 3 years ago, an incident with a couple shocked Ufa. 2 criminals attacked the young people because of their Honda Accord. She wanted to profit from selling the car to live without restrictions. A real estate agent from Tatarstan drove to a distant district to conclude a contract and disappeared. Soon, her Infiniti was found on the territory of the neighboring Republic of Mariel. Soon, law enforcement arrested a person suspected of being connected to the woman's disappearance. The luxurious car appealed to her client who was selling a country house. He dealt cruelly with the owner of the car, hid traces in the yard, and drove away to enjoy the unexpected acquisition. On the road, however, he could not maintain control of the steering, drove off the roadway and left the car, getting home by hitchhiking. When checking the connection to the vehicle, the investigators asked themselves the question, how does an ordinary engineer have a car worth more than 1 million rubles with a salary of only 15,000? It turned out that Emil had an additional source of income. The young man was a football fan. He could flawlessly name the lineup of any European team from various years. He played in the yard, and with the advent of computers, he became an enthusiastic virtual footballer. He spent long hours on the internet analyzing professional games. This passion developed into sports betting. Emil reached such a level of skill that he could predict game results with high accuracy, which brought him a decent income. One of the big wins allowed him to fulfill a long-cherished dream, to become the owner of a prestigious car. The investigators became interested in Emil's relationships with betting offices. Had luck perhaps smiled too broadly on him? So generously that the organizers preferred to eliminate the lucky one rather than pay out such a sum. Or did the man receive his winnings, but the bookmakers decided to take the money back by staging a robbery? Or is everything much simpler? Emil lent the won funds as a loan, or he got into debt himself while trying to recoup his losses. However, the financial trail quickly lost priority. The investigators discovered that Emil had yet another passion and dream. The chances of Emil Shaiganov's return home became increasingly slim. However, no traces of him were found. Where to look for the person responsible for the incident also remained a mystery. The investigation showed that Emil had been married until recently. His family life lasted about 4 years. The connection broke down due to the two different characters of the spouses. The man valued his small heir very much. However, he saw a completely different companion at his side. Why did Emil strive for exactly such a family model? He himself grew up in a completely different atmosphere. His father died when he was still very young. He was raised by his grandmother and his mother. Such men usually choose women who take the initiative into their hands. Emil's friends assured that he simply held to old-fashioned views in a positive sense. He was raised on the adventure novels of Jules Verne. Emil valued classical literature that promoted nobility, responsibility, and loyalty. Women who evaluated everything through the lens of money did not arouse his interest. Emil saw no point in communicating with people who had never heard of Captain Grey and believed in fairy tales about eternal happiness. For a long time, he had no successful relationships as he searched for his ideal. After the end of an unhappy marriage, Emil decided that only a relationship with a woman would bring him true happiness, for whom he would be the first and only. Shortly before his mysterious disappearance, he hinted to his best friend Igor that his dream might soon come true. Emil mentioned meetings with a woman whom he wanted to introduce to his close ones soon. However, Igor for some reason was not happy, but seemed rather troubled by this news. The investigators of the disappearance learned about the new chosen one of the missing person. However, one could hardly call her mature. The young person was not even 16 years old yet. The acquaintance with Emil Shaiganov took place on the internet. She used the simple pseudonym Cherry Lady. Why Emil wrote to her one evening, the investigators could not find out. They learned about the existence of this person when examining Shaiganov's digital contacts. Technical specialists were able to crack the passwords to his computers, and the task force gained access to all his personal correspondence. Cherry Lady immediately aroused special interest in the investigation. On the day of Emil's disappearance, the young woman had persistently suggested to him since early morning to come to the country house of her acquaintances. Around 6 o'clock in the evening, he informed her that he would finish his work, stop by home to change clothes, and be with her in 1.5 to 2 hours. The reason why he did not return from this meeting remained unclear. The identity of the young acquaintance of Shaiganov was quickly determined. Karina Kuiko lived with her mother and attended a school in the Ufa district, from which she was expelled for absences. She tried to continue her education at 2 other educational institutions, but could not find common ground with the teaching staff. Remarkably, Karina was until recently considered one of the best students. What caused the model student to transform into a truant who is not accepted in decent schools? The mother explained this with a serious illness, because of which the daughter had to care for her. What illness it was exactly and why the woman allowed her daughter to neglect school remained a mystery. By the time the investigators began to take interest in Karina, her mother had already recovered, but her own life still occupied the woman more than her daughter's affairs. She actively searched for a life partner and paid little attention to upbringing. The woman searched for a potential husband via the internet. Presumably, Karina decided to follow her example. The relationship with Emil developed gradually. For several weeks, they wrote messages to each other, then finally met. For some reason, this meeting convinced the man that exactly this young woman was the right one for him. Petite, attractive, inexperienced. a tender bud that would fully bloom under his protection and care. The relationship between Emil and Karina remained unclear. The man did not push for developments, since the girl insisted on her inexperience. Nevertheless, he rented an apartment for her in Ufa after learning about her difficulties with studies, and decided that she could continue her education in the city. Interestingly, the young person's move to the apartment paid for by an adult man took place with her mother's consent. However, it soon turned out that Karina planned to live there not alone, but with a group of friends. Emil expressed his disapproval. The offended Karina left the apartment, but did not disappear from his life. When law enforcement brought her to the station, she insisted that their meeting on the day of Emil's disappearance had not taken place. According to her words, he simply had not arrived at the agreed location. The officers could not immediately refute this version. Karina was released home, but remained under observation. The investigative team began to examine the girl's environment. Soon it became obvious that she maintained connections to criminal elements. Among her acquaintances, 2 with previous convictions stood out. Ruslan Abbasov, 22 years old, unemployed, had been prosecuted for theft and assault with a stabbing weapon. And Nikolai Pankov, 19 years old, had received a suspended sentence for the unlawful appropriation of a car. The investigators questioned neighbors, villagers, and classmates about Karina and these boys. Eventually, they managed to find out something remarkable. Information appeared about a group of young people who had taken possession of an expensive vehicle. They tried to sell it, but something went wrong, and they decided to get rid of it. The burned-out Lexus belonging to Emil was found not far from the locality where Karina and her company lived. This was hardly a coincidence. The young woman was again invited for a conversation with the investigator. This time she completely refused to communicate, although she was only being questioned as a witness. At this time, in the neighboring rooms, the operatives were conversing with Pankov and Abbasov. One of the boys proved to be more open and decided to write a confession. The law enforcement officers suspected an unpleasant outcome for Emil Shaiganov, but the detailed account of what had happened astonished even the most experienced specialists. Nikolai Pankov confessed his participation in Emil Shaiganov's disappearance, but pointed out that he was not the main participant in this story. According to his words, he acted according to a plan that was developed by Karina. Karina's main helper was her close friend, Danil Makunin, who had also not completed his school education. The teenager's plan was not particularly complicated. Karina invites Emil to the dacha, introduces Makunin as her brother, Abbasov and Pankov as his friends, and begins to play the role of a hospitable hostess. She treats her admirer to a dish prepared with her own hands. Emil hardly suspected what his beloved had added to the food. Karina and Danil planned to mix in sleeping pills. After that, the entire group intended to dispose of the helpless Shaiganov. They decided to hide the traces of their actions in a small wooded area nearby. Beforehand, they took all valuables from his pockets, including the car keys. The vehicle itself became their main target. The young people dreamed of becoming rich and no longer being dependent on their parents. The investigators believed Pankov's version that the plan was developed by Karina. However, it was hard to imagine how this young person could think up such a thing. During interrogations, Karina did not hide the absence of romantic feelings for Emil. But what happened afterwards was terrible. The 30-year-old admirer found himself in a terrible situation. From the beginning, everything did not go according to the conceived scenario. The sleeping pills simply did not begin to work. The boys got tired of waiting and decided to check whether he could defend himself. They began pushing Emil and delivering blows. He tried to leave, but Karina persuaded him to ignore the troublemakers. While she continued playing the role of the caring girlfriend, she noticed that he looked pale and suggested lying down. The man, whose strength was running out, agreed. As soon as he had made himself comfortable in the bedroom, the men stormed in. First, they used a garden tool and acted on the defenseless person with it many times. Besov was actively supported by young Daniel. He used kitchen utensils and then brought a heavy tool for the blow. When the young men thought that everything was over, they carried Emil to the car. They put him in the trunk and drove to a forest area, as they had planned beforehand. However, Emil regained consciousness. Thereupon, Daniel and Ruslan used a garden tool against him. After that, Emil fell silent forever. But this did not seem enough to the young people. After convincing himself of the irreversibility of the situation, Besov again reached for the cutting object. Ruslan performed a particularly cruel act toward the unfortunate man. Then he began recording what was happening with the camera of his mobile phone. Later in his statement, he would explain the motives for this behavior quite strangely. According to his words, he wanted to prove his feelings to Karina in this way. However, the affection for Karina did not prevent both young men from giving detailed testimony against her. No one tried to protect her from responsibility. The organizers of the incident with Emil Sheganov faced at most 10 years in prison. The legislation does not allow for a stricter punishment for the young participants. Will anyone support Karina after her release? To this day, Karina cannot even count on the support of her own mother. The 15th of October 2021, Friday. An ordinary autumn day in the provincial town Tikhogorsk. In school number 156, the last bell rang. Alisa Krausova said goodbye to her friends at the school gate at 14:38. The surveillance camera of a nearby shop recorded how she walked in a blue jacket and with a backpack with unicorn motif toward her home. This 40-second video clip was the last known image of Alisa for the next 783 days. At 17:15, Anna Krausova, Alisa's mother, called the police. Her daughter had not returned home and was not answering calls. The girl's phone was switched off. The distance from the school to the house was 1.2 kilometers, a route that Alisa had covered daily for 2 years. I knew immediately that something had happened. Alisa was never more than 15 minutes late. She always reported when she was delayed at friends, recalls Anna Krausova. The first police patrol arrived at the Krausov family house at 18:03. Sergeant Igor Petrov took the missing person report, but noted that the case would officially be opened only after 24 hours. This was the standard procedure. Contrary to instructions, Anna immediately began her own search measures. She called all her daughter's friends, teachers and neighbors. By midnight, more than 30 volunteers combed the area between the school and the Krausov family house. By morning, their number increased to 114 people. Investigator Nikolai Sawin received the case about the disappearance of Alisa Krausova on the 16th of October at 9:30 in the morning. At this time, 28 witnesses had already been questioned, including teachers, classmates, and school employees. The girl attended all 6 lessons. Nothing unusual was observed in her behavior. Grades on this day: mathematics, a 1, Russian, a 2, physical education, excused from class due to a mild cold, from the report of class teacher Irina Smirnova. The surveillance camera data confirmed that Alisa left the school grounds at 14:38. After that, her trail was lost. The camera at the corner of Lesnaja Street, where she should have appeared after 4 to 5 minutes, did not record her passage. In the first week of investigations, the police pursued 3 main theories: running away from home, rejected due to lack of motives and the fact that all of Alisa's belongings remained at home; kidnapping, most likely version; and accident. The search in ravines and abandoned buildings remained fruitless. Mikhail Krausov, Alisa's father, who lived in Novosibirsk after the divorce, was under suspicion in the first 2 weeks of the investigation. A check revealed that he was at his workplace on the day of his daughter's disappearance, which was confirmed by surveillance cameras and statements from colleagues. On the 25th of October, there was the first breakthrough in the investigation. A witness reported that he had seen a girl resembling Alisa talking with a man in work clothes near the school. The composite sketch created was too imprecise. A man between 45 and 55 years old, medium height, in dark jacket and cap. At the end of the first search month, the intensity of the investigation began to decrease. All basements and attics within a radius of 2 kilometers from the place of disappearance had been checked. All persons who had previously been convicted of crimes against minors and lived in the city were questioned. Divers examined the city pond. The longer a child is not found, the lower the chances of discovering it alive. Statistics are merciless. After 72 hours, the probability of a happy outcome drops to 30%. After 2 weeks to 10%. From an interview with criminalist Andrei Volkow, who worked as a consultant in the case. The search for Alisa was extensively covered in local and federal media in the first 2 weeks. For a month, the girl's face was visible on newspaper front pages. Volunteers from neighboring cities came to help with the search, but gradually society's attention turned to other news. In January 2022, 3 months after the disappearance, Alisa Kravtsova's case was reclassified into the category missing with suspicion of criminal outcome. This meant that active search was stopped and the information was transferred for regular checking in databases. Anna Kravtsova refused to accept this situation. She quit her job to devote all time to searching for her daughter. With savings and loans, she printed more than 100,000 flyers with Alisa's photo, which she regularly updated throughout the city and in neighboring settlements. I hung up new advertisements every 2 weeks, even when the old ones were not torn down. People should constantly see Alisa's face to remember it. I knew she was alive. A mother's heart does not deceive, Anna tells. Investigator Nikolai Savin continued working on the case in his free time, contrary to his superior's instructions. He regularly returned to the documents and checked new reports, which became fewer and fewer. Something about this case gave me no peace. Everything was too clean. No traces. No clues. As if Alisa had simply disappeared on a stretch of 200 meters between 2 surveillance cameras. From Investigator Savin's statement. On the anniversary of Alisa's disappearance, a local television station made a short report. Footage from the search, interviews with the mother, and school photos of Alisa were shown. The report ended with the standard phrase, "If you have any information, please call the hotline." At this time, most residents of Tychegorsk had already resigned themselves to the thought that Alisa was no longer alive. In school number 156, a memorial photo was placed in the classroom where Alisa had been taught. Only 2 people did not lose hope, Alisa's mother and investigator Savin. And as the further investigation showed, their persistence was justified. Because all this time, Alisa Kravtsova was located only a few meters from her former classmates, under the floor of school number 156, in a secret room that was set up by a person whom everyone considered inconspicuous and harmless. Viktor Morozov, a 54-year-old school janitor who had worked at the institution for 15 years, possessed impeccable references and was respected by colleagues, transformed a technical tunnel under the school into a prison for Alisa. But until his exposure, many months of silence and despair remained. The room in which Viktor Morozov held Alisa Kravtsova was a 2.5 by 3 meter room in a technical tunnel under the gymnasium of school number 156. According to investigation documents, Morozov began setting up this room 6 months before the kidnapping. The technical tunnels were built in the 1970s for housing utility lines. On the official plans of the school, they were marked as non-operational after the renovation of the building in 1998. In fact, only the janitor and individual employees of maintenance companies knew about them. We only used the main technical floor for access to utility lines. Most employees did not even know about the existence of additional tunnels, from the statement of plumber Gennady Petrov, who maintained the school building. Morozov created a hidden passage to the tunnel through the storage room for sports equipment. The false wall on movable hinges looked like an ordinary part of the room, filled with boxes and household items. The room itself was carefully soundproofed with old mattresses and styrofoam panels. The walls were lined with boards. The floor was covered with linoleum. Ventilation was provided through a pipe specially laid by Morozov that led to the school's backyard behind the garbage containers. The equipment of the room included a metal bed with a thin mattress, a plastic table and chair, a chemical toilet, a wash basin with water connection from the school system, an electric heater, a weak lamp connected to the school's electrical grid, and a metal cabinet for clothes and hygiene articles. According to Alisa's statement, the lighting in the room was weak. Often the lamp only functioned for a few hours a day. Morozov explained this with the necessity of saving electricity to avoid arousing suspicion through increased consumption. I didn't see sunlight for 783 days. Only a weak yellow light bulb and a flashlight that he sometimes left behind. From Alisa's first interview with psychologists after her liberation. The 15th of October 2021, the day of the kidnapping, was reconstructed by the investigators based on the statements of the victim and the perpetrator himself. Morozov lured Alisa into the school after classes, saying her mother had asked him to collect some things from the locker room. After leading Alisa into the storage room of the gymnasium, he stunned her with a blow to the head and then brought her to the prepared room. When I woke up, it was completely dark. I didn't understand where I was. My head hurt very much. At first I thought I was dead, from Alisa's statement. The detention regime established by Morozov was strictly regulated. He came twice a day, in the morning between 6 and 7 o'clock, before school began, and in the evening between 19 and 20 o'clock, when only the cleaning staff were in the building. He brought food, necessary hygiene articles, and disposed of waste. The nutrition, reconstructed based on receipts from stores found in Morozov's apartment, was meager but sufficient for survival, including bread, cereals, pasta, canned goods such as meat and fish preserves, fresh vegetables in limited quantities, fruit like apples and bananas once per week, milk and kefir, and chocolate on holidays. During the entire captivity, Alisa received no medical help. During cold illnesses, Morozov gave her ordinary antiviral medications that he had bought at the pharmacy. I had very high fever twice. I thought I would die. He brought paracetamol and forced me to drink a lot, Alisa remembers. Psychologically, the heaviest aspect of captivity was the constant presence of life above her head. Through the ceiling, the sounds of the school penetrated clearly, including bells for classes, children's voices, the bouncing of balls in the gymnasium, and footsteps. I heard them running in physical education class. Sometimes I recognized the teachers' voices. When the children laughed during recess, I covered my ears and cried, Alisa tells. According to Alisa, she was in a state of constant fear and despair in the first months of captivity. Morozov threatened to kill her and her mother if she tried to attract attention or escape. Alisa made several attempts to draw attention to herself or call out, but the sound insulation and the noise of the school made these attempts unsuccessful. I screamed when I heard many voices above my head. I screamed until I became hoarse. Then I understood that it was pointless and stopped. Over time, Alisa developed a system for orientation in time. She created a calendar from scratches on the wall and marked the days. She determined the time of day based on the bell and sounds in the school. She learned the schedule based on the sounds and activities above her head. Morozov confessed during questioning to having developed a strange attachment to his victim. He brought her books from the school library, notebooks and pencils. In the third month of captivity, he gave her a radio that only worked on one frequency with the state radio station. In the notebooks found during liberation, Alisa kept a diary, drew and solved mathematical problems from textbooks. Psychologists note that this intellectual activity probably helped Alisa preserve her mind under conditions of sensory deprivation. I knew that I had to continue learning. I imagined that I was sitting in class together with everyone else. I solved problems that I heard when mathematics class was taking place, Alisa tells. Hundreds of drawings made with pencils and ballpoint pens were discovered on the walls of the room. They reflect Alisa's psychological state in different phases of captivity. In the first months, dark images dominated, mainly of home and family. In the middle period, abstract patterns, labyrinths, and mathematical formulas emerged. In the last period, she created complex compositions with many details and tried to recreate natural landscapes. It is noteworthy that none of the drawings depicted Morozov himself or the room of captivity. The interaction with the kidnapper was minimal, according to Alisa's statement. Morozov rarely spoke with her and mainly gave short instructions. In the first year, he reacted aggressively to all attempts to ask questions. In the second year, he became more talkative and sometimes told about events in the school or city. He said that he took better care of me than my parents, that I should be grateful. I nodded and agreed because I was afraid, Alisa remembers. Physical violence of a sexual nature did not occur according to medical examination and psychological interviews. However, there were cases of physical punishment for attempts at inappropriate behavior, including beatings with a ruler on the hands and food deprivation for 1 day. During the second year of captivity, Alisa developed signs of severe depression and psychological adaptation to the situation. She offered less resistance, fulfilled all of Morozov's demands, and showed signs of the so-called Stockholm Syndrome, a psychological attachment to the aggressor. This is a normal reaction of the psyche to a long-lasting traumatic situation. Alisa adapts to conditions that she cannot change, explains psychologist Irina Kovaleva, who worked with Alisa after her liberation. A significant factor in Alisa's psychological state was the constant hope for rescue. In her diary, she mentioned her mother several times and expressed the conviction that she would not stop searching. "Mama will find me. I know it. I just have to wait." Entry from the 12th of June 2022, written in the margin of a Russian textbook. Toward the end of the second year of captivity, Morozov began to show signs of nervousness. According to Alisa, he often spoke of the necessity of a move and mentioned that it was no longer safe in the school. As the investigation later revealed, this coincided with the appearance of a new cleaning woman, Svetlana Orlova, in the school, who began to notice peculiarities in the janitor's behavior. Alisa spent 783 days in the underground room. During this time, she grew 7 centimeters, lost 5 kilograms of weight, filled 18 notebooks with texts and drawings, read 43 books that Morozov brought, and survived 2 serious illnesses without medical help. Upon her discovery on the 5th of December 2023, doctors diagnosed Alisa with moderate anemia, avitaminosis, partial muscle atrophy, sleep cycle disturbance, and signs of depression and PTSD. Considering the detention conditions, the physical condition of the victim can be considered satisfactory. This testifies to a high degree of resilience and the organism's ability to adapt to extreme conditions, from the opinion of the Medical Commission. Experts believe that Alisa's return to normal life will be a long process. Physical rehabilitation can take 6 months to a year, psychological rehabilitation several years. The most important thing is that Alisa has not lost the ability to trust people. She actively engages in contact, expresses emotions, and makes plans for the future. That is a good prognostic sign, states psychologist Kovaleva. During the investigation, it was established that Morozov had not randomly chosen Alisa as a victim. He had been observing her for several months. In his apartment were found photos of Alisa taken with a hidden camera on the school grounds and a separate notebook with notes about her schedule and movement routes. "I wanted someone to be completely dependent on me." The only explanation of his motives that Morozov gave during interrogation, refusing to answer further questions without a lawyer. The investigation in the case of Alisa Kravtsova received an unexpected impulse on the 15th of September 2023, almost 2 years after her disappearance. On this day, Svetlana Orlova, a 25-year-old cleaning lady who had begun working at school number 156, noticed the strange behavior of the janitor Viktor Morozov. He always came to school earlier than everyone else and left last. At certain times, around 6 o'clock in the morning and after 7 o'clock in the evening, he forbade anyone from staying in the hallway next to the gymnasium, explaining this with checking the communication systems from Orlova's statement. Initially, The cleaning lady paid no attention to this. The situation changed on the 28th of September when she accidentally discovered food packaging with receipts in the garbage container. The amount of purchases seemed excessive to her for a single man. On the 10th of October, Orlova noticed that Morozov was carrying a bag with something that looked like dirty laundry from the storage room of the gymnasium. When asked what he was doing, the janitor reacted aggressively and forbade her from approaching this place. I began intentionally coming earlier and observing. 3 times I saw him carrying food into the storage room of the gymnasium, although there was no refrigerator there. Once I noticed that he was carrying women's sanitary pads. That finally convinced me that something was wrong, Orlova tells. On the 20th of October, an incident occurred that became the turning point in the investigation. A 7th grade student, Dmitry Volkov, was carrying out a punishment. He was mopping the floor in the gymnasium after classes. In the empty room, he heard a strange knocking that came from below. I thought it was the pipes. But then the knocking became rhythmic, as if someone was knocking intentionally. I told the sports teacher, but he said it was the heating system, from the interview with Dmitry. The boy shared his observation with his mother, who knew about the story of the missing Alisa. She called the hotline and reported the strange noise. The report was registered but not immediately processed. Parallel to this, investigator Nikolai Savin, who was still unofficially dealing with the case, noticed a strange regularity in the utility costs of School 156. The analysis showed that water consumption in the building during holidays and on weekends was unusually high for an empty building. I requested data for 2 years. At certain times, early in the morning and late in the evening, stable water consumption was recorded, even when the school was closed. This contradicted logic from the investigator's report. On the 1st of November, Svetlana Orlova discovered in the pocket of Morozov's work jacket, which was left in the storage room, a receipt from a children's store for purchasing a t-shirt in youth size. Disturbed by the find, she photographed the receipt and sent it anonymously by email to the police, indicating the janitor's name. This information reached investigator Savin, who immediately connected it with the water consumption data. On the 3rd of November, he obtained a warrant for secret surveillance of Morozov. We installed hidden cameras at the entrances to the basement rooms of the school and in the backyard. We began tracking the suspect's movements, reports Savin. On the 15th of November, surveillance recorded how Morozov entered the storage room of the gymnasium at 6:12 in the morning with a bag of food and came out 18 minutes later without the bag. In the evening of the same day, the picture repeated. On the 25th of November, a secret inspection of the technical plans of the school was conducted. It turned out that detailed plans of the basement connections were missing from the documentation, presumably due to loss during renovation of the building. We brought in a specialist with a thermal imaging camera to scan the floor in the gymnasium. The results showed anomalous thermal activity in the northeastern corner of the room, indicating the presence of a heated space under the floor from the technical report. On the 1st of December, investigator Savin obtained a search warrant for the school premises, particularly for the storage room of the gymnasium and the technical rooms underneath. The operation was planned for the 5th of December to minimize the presence of children in the building. 24 hours before the planned search, the police established round-the-clock surveillance of Morozov. Investigator Savin decided to arrest the suspect during his next attempt to gain access to the secret room. On the 5th of December 2023 at 6:40 in the morning, Viktor Morozov arrived at school number 156. Surveillance cameras recorded how he entered the building from the service yard side and carried 2 bags of food. At 6:07, he proceeded to the gymnasium, where he was immediately arrested by the task force under the leadership of investigator Savin. During the arrest, Morozov resisted, tried to flee, shouted that the police had no right to be in the school. In his bags, they found bread, milk, apples, chocolate, and a set of women's underwear in youth size. When we asked for whom these things were intended, he remained silent and demanded a lawyer, recalls one of the task force members. After Morozov's arrest, the group of forensic technicians began examining the storage room of the gymnasium. The total area of the room was 18 square meters. At first glance, it was an ordinary storage room filled with boxes, sports equipment, and tools. At 6:42, forensic technician Oleg Vasiliev discovered an anomaly in the construction of the back wall. Upon closer examination, it turned out that part of the wall could be moved on metal hinges and formed a passage of 70 by 120 centimeters. The mechanism was thought out down to the smallest detail. The false wall was held by counterweights and opened almost silently. From the outside, the construction looked like an ordinary wall. From the inside, it was reinforced with metal plates from the forensic technician's report. Behind the passage was a narrow corridor of about 5 meters length that led to a locked metal door. The door was equipped with 3 locks and a bolt. At 7:15, after deploying a specialist to open the locks, a group of rescuers and medics entered the room. On the bed was Alisa Kravtsova, emaciated, with long, disheveled hair, in a t-shirt and sweatpants. Alisa was not sleeping and cowered in the corner of the bed at the sight of the strangers. The first thing she asked was, "Are you real?" We confirmed that we were real police officers and had come to rescue her. She burst into tears, tells Sergeant Olga Smirnova, who was the first to enter the room. The medical examination on site showed that Alisa's condition was stable. Body temperature 36.6 degrees Celsius, pulse accelerated, 110 beats per minute, blood pressure lowered, 90 to 60 millimeters of mercury. Visible injuries were not found. At 7:35, Alisa was carried on a stretcher from the basement and brought to an ambulance. The school grounds were cordoned off at this time. The school principal, Elena Sokolova, who had arrived at the crime scene, was in a state of shock. "I cannot believe that this happened in our school, under our feet. How could we not know?" From the first comment of the director to the press. At 7:47, Anna Kravtsova, Alisa's mother, arrived at the hospital. The doctors allowed a brief meeting under the supervision of a psychologist. That was one of the strongest emotional scenes I have seen in 15 years of work. Mother and daughter first simply looked at each other and did not believe in the reality of what was happening. Then Alisa whispered, "Mama," and they embraced crying, recalls psychologist Irina Kovaleva. The detailed examination of Alisa in the hospital revealed several health problems, but to the doctor's surprise, Alisa's condition was better than expected for a person who had spent more than 2 years in underground captivity. The patient was diagnosed with anemia, vitamin D deficiency, reduced muscle tension, and vision problems. However, there are no signs of serious infections, bone fractures, or systemic diseases from the medical assessment. The room where Alisa was held was carefully examined by forensic technicians. 18 notebooks with notes and drawings were found in the room. Additionally, the investigators discovered 43 books from the school program and fiction, a homemade calendar made from notches on the wall, a battery-powered radio, a supply of food for 3 to 4 days, as well as personal items and hygiene articles. Particular attention of the investigators was drawn to the video surveillance system. A hidden camera was installed in the room, which was connected to a monitor in Morozov's apartment. According to his own confession, he observed Alisa when he was not with her. On the same day, the police searched Morozov's apartment. Records about Alisa's daily routine were found. The officers discovered detailed plans of the school with markings about the movements of staff and more than 200 photos of Alisa that were taken before the kidnapping. Additionally, a journal for recording food and medications that he gave her was found, as well as USB sticks with recordings from the camera in the room. Viktor Morozov, who was brought to the detention facility, refused to testify without a lawyer. During the psychiatric examination, a personality disorder was diagnosed in him, but he was found to be of sound mind and capable of bearing responsibility for his actions. He was fully aware of the criminal character of his actions. The planning was methodical, with well-thought-out precautionary measures. From the assessment of the psychiatric examination, the news about the discovery of Alisa Kravtsova, who was considered dead, became a sensation of federal proportions. The area around school number 156 became a pilgrimage site for journalists from the entire country. It is simultaneously a miracle and a nightmare. A miracle that Alisa survived and was found. A nightmare that this happened before everyone's eyes. Comment of a forensic expert in the evening news. The trial against Viktor Morozov began on the 15th of March 2024. He was charged with kidnapping a minor, illegal deprivation of liberty, grievous bodily harm, and psychological violence. The proceedings took place behind closed doors since a minor victim was involved. Alisa Kravtsova gave her testimony via video link in the presence of a psychologist. According to expert assessments, a direct meeting with Morozov could have caused her additional psychological trauma. On the 21st of April, 2024, the court announced the verdict. 19 years imprisonment in a penal colony with strict regime and subsequent mandatory observation by a psychiatrist for 5 years. Morozov partially confessed guilt and claimed that he took care of Alisa and did not want to harm her. By court decision, the former janitor was also ordered to pay compensation of 5 million rubles for moral damages in favor of the victim. Given the absence of significant assets of the convicted person, the actual payment of this sum remains questionable. The physical rehabilitation of Alisa Kravtsova lasted approximately 4 months. According to the attending physician Natalia Ivanova, the main problems were restoration of muscle tone, adaptation to normal daylight, and normalization of sleep rhythm. By May 2024, most physiological indicators returned to normal values for her age. The most difficult thing was learning to walk longer distances again. In the first 2 weeks, she could barely cover 100 meters. From an interview with rehabilitation expert Sergei Petrov. The psychological rehabilitation proved to be a longer process. Alisa was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety symptoms, and occasional panic attacks. Particularly difficult for her was adaptation to open spaces and interaction with unknown people. The long isolation during puberty disrupted the normal socialization process. We are working on restoring basic trust in the world and building healthy social bonds, comments psychologist Irina Kovaleva. By September 2024, Alisa could return to learning, but not in a normal school, but in homeschooling with gradual inclusion of group activities. Despite a 2-year break, Alisa showed good knowledge in the main subjects, especially in mathematics and Russian, which she had continued to study independently during her captivity. Alisa's story triggered a broad public response and led to systematic changes in the field of educational institution security. The Ministry of Education initiated a nationwide program to inspect all technical rooms in the country's schools, which uncovered more than 3,000 security violations and deviations from construction plans. A mandatory alarm system was introduced at all technical entrances to basement and attic spaces of schools. New protocols for hiring technical personnel in educational institutions were developed, including mandatory screening for mental disorders. Control over the issuance of keys for technical rooms was strengthened, and electronic visitor logs were introduced. The director of school number 156, Elena Sokolova, was dismissed with the formulation due to loss of confidence. During the internal investigation, it emerged that she had ignored staff complaints about Morozov's strange behavior and had not ensured adequate control over the technical rooms. Svetlana Orlova, the cleaning lady whose vigilance played a key role in Alisa's rescue, received the State Award for saving human life and a monetary prize from the regional government. She continues to work at school number 156, which is led by a new director, investigator Nikolai Savin was promoted to major and appointed head of the department for investigating crimes against minors. Under his leadership, a special protocol for searching for missing children was created, which received the name Alisa Protocol. Anna Kravtsova, Alisa's mother, founded the charity foundation I Believe in Search to support missing children after reunification with her daughter. The foundation provides psychological and legal support for families whose children are missing and also finances search operations. The most important thing is to never give up. Even when everyone says there is no hope, one must continue searching. My case shows that miracles happen, says Anna in her speeches to parents of missing children. As of September 2024, Alisa Kravtsova continues her rehabilitation course. In a rare interview that she gave to a children's magazine with permission from psychologists, Alisa spoke about her desire to become an architect in the future. I spent a lot of time drawing houses and rooms in my notebook. Now I want to design real houses, spacious, bright, with large windows and many exits. Journalists following the story note Alisa's amazing resilience, who withstood a test that would have broken most adults. Psychologists describe Alisa Kravtsova's case as an extraordinary example of human resilience and adaptability. The secret room under the gymnasium of school number 156 was walled up by decision of the city authorities. In its place, a memorial plaque was installed with the inscription, "In memory of 783 days of courage of Alisa Kravtsova, 2021 to 2023. Alisa's story, who survived in underground captivity, became a reminder that sometimes the most terrible crimes happen directly under our feet, hidden from view only by a thin layer of concrete and human indifference.